Climate change is something that affects us all in one way or another, whether it be direct or indirect.
Hello, my name is Cameron Nuza.
I'm April Ludlow.
My name is Drew.
And I am Cheyenne Ledford, and today we will be discussing how rising sea levels are affecting the coast. So to begin, we thought that it would be a good idea to give you a little outline of what we will be talking about. So I will be talking about the basis and the foundation and the past and future of why this is occurring and what humans are doing to contribute to this process. Trell will be talking about Florida and how the coast is affected there. April will be talking about Greenland and the melting glaciers and how that is affecting the coast. And Cameron will be wrapping it up with future implications, how to prevent this or slow it down, and kind of close it up there. So for our fellow classmates, we thought it would be a good idea to deem this thesis necessary. Due to greenhouse gases, glacial melting, and temperature rise, oceans are experiencing rising levels which are negatively impacting the coast. This is kind of like the things that we're, obviously you know what a thesis is. This is what we're going to be talking about throughout the course of the presentation. So to begin, some background, like I mentioned before, the past and the future. Since 1880, sea levels have risen about 8 inches, and in the past 25 years, 3 of those 8 inches have occurred. This can be contributed to, according to NASA, Antarctica and Greenland have had their glaciers melting. That's contributing to the rising sea levels. And additionally, in 2100, if this process isn't slowed down, because it can't be like prevented, but we can slow it down, there's approximately about 2 feet of sea level that will rise, which doesn't sound like a lot, but I'll show you images in a few slides, and it's a lot. So, do I have any visual learners in here? See hands? Yes. Visual learners. Okay, so this little cabin right here, is, you can see right here the damage that has been done by the coast. And this picture was taken in 2016, but today this cabin is no longer there. As you can see, it's not livable, and this is what's starting to happen to Florida and the homes that are having to relocate because their coast has been taken out. These are also islands off of the coast of Australia, which aren't near us, but this is also happening near Florida. And then these 2 little islands, the top island, this picture was taken in 2016. You can see that there was like an island here, but now there's only 1 little cabin, and then today that cabin is no longer here. And then lastly, this little village in the left-hand corner is, you can kind of see that the water is flooding into the village and is making people relocate and find new homes. It's very unfortunate. So you might be wondering, like, why does all of this occur? What is going on? What are humans doing to contribute to this process? Well, this chart kind of elaborates on the greenhouse gas emissions and what we are doing to kind of contribute to this process. So one of them is transportation. That's the biggest one. Fossil fuels used in planes, trains, buses, everything along that, cars, going into the atmosphere, getting produced, heating the earth. Other types of examples are the electricity industry, commercial and residential businesses, and agriculture. This is only the US, so this doesn't even talk about international. But you can see that we're impacting it a lot, so we can only imagine what other countries are doing. EPA also said that Earth's temperature is rising because of all of the things that humans are doing, and that is causing the water to warm, which is causing the water to expand, which is causing glaciers to melt, which is causing sea levels to rise. So like I mentioned before, the Earth's atmosphere is being affected. This is the natural greenhouse effect, so what's supposed to be happening naturally. But on the left, this is being intensified by humans, so naturally more heat would escape into the space, but instead it's being produced back into Earth, and that is what is making temperature rise. So lastly, this little slide shows the East Coast, and the more red it is, the more that damage is being done in that area. And as you can see, Florida is being impacted. This is 2100, if I didn't mention that before. And that is in the span of our lifetime, so it's important for us to kind of help, and Trell will talk more about what's going to happen in Florida.
So yeah, my first example is Florida. So pretty much I picked Florida because me and my group members decided for me to pick somewhere local like the United States. So I was like, why not pick Florida or Louisiana? So I pretty much found some stuff on both. So I found more on rising sea levels in Florida. And plus, the reason why I picked Florida, because most people talk about going on vacations to Florida. And pretty much my picture, well, my title slide is I got pretty much what Florida's gonna look like in the next maybe century or sometime in our lifetime. So the coastal impact of Florida. So in the state of Florida, there has been concerns with rising sea levels. Florida wants to present the flooding that would have devastating effects on residents and the economy. So they're trying to like take precautions now. As of now, it appears that sea levels are rising much higher and faster than previously predicted. So since sea levels rise is speeding up, what that means is sea levels have risen 8 inches since 1950. The speeds of the rise have accelerated over the last 10 years, and it is rising 1 inch to every 3 years. So reasons for the sea level rise, so thunderstorms. So the reason why I picked thunderstorms, because thunderstorms cause a lot of flooding, and then global warming, everybody should know about global warming, cause the melting of ice, and the melting of ice can cause new water to enter the oceans. So by the end of the century, sea levels will continue to rise. Sea levels will rise as much as 6 to 80 feet. Consequences from the rising sea levels could be disastrous in many parts of the United States, such as Louisiana and Florida, and more states that are on the coastline of the United States as well. So the future of Florida. So in years to come, oceans could rise 2 feet, forcing people to relocate. So pretty much this is my opinion. I feel like since people will have to like relocate, I feel like most people are probably not going to leave state. They're going to probably stay in Florida. Like they're probably going to travel up north, like to Orlando, so that could lead to overcrowding in other cities. So another prediction is South Florida can experience an immense amount of flooding, making cities in the area unrecognizable, and more severe weather resulting in millions of dollars worth of damage. Something we're probably not going to be willing to spend. So here's pretty much a map of how Florida will look. It's pretty much kind of the same picture of my title slide. So pretty much the bottom part is pretty much how Florida is going to look. Pretty much everything's going to be wiped out, like cities, beaches, businesses, and everything. And pretty much this is in between 2050 to 2075, so that's 25 years. But this is like a prediction, so this doesn't necessarily mean this is true. So cities affected: Miami, Pensacola, Fort Myers, Naples, and Jacksonville. These are the main cities that people should know about. Well, at least I know about. But there's going to be tons of like smaller cities in Florida that are going to be affected as well. So effects on Florida, dealing with rising sea levels, hurricanes have been much more active. The entire city of Miami would be forced to relocate, once I already kind of talked about that, and businesses and homes are no longer going to be available. And then solutions, so installing water pumps all throughout the state. I see some like good things with that and some bad things. I feel like the bad thing is I think installing water pumps would probably be a lot of money, like millions and millions of dollars. And the good thing about installing water pumps throughout the state is that it can like take off all the runoff water and pump it back into the ocean. And that's pretty much it.
Alright, so as mentioned before, I'm April and I'm going to be talking about Greenland because my example was how this can affect the global aspect. So basically you can think of Greenland as sitting on a giant sheet of ice, a very, very thick sheet of ice. If you look at this example here, it shows exactly where the ice is, and all the red is where it is slowly beginning to melt away. This is all because of thermal warming in the waters. Basically, as stated before, once the water gets warmer, it starts to expand. And as we know, ice and warm things do not mix. So slowly on the sides here, everything's starting to melt away, which is causing the beaches and everything on Greenland to slowly become more flooded. This is gonna have the same effect as what would happen in Florida. Basically, it's gonna start getting to the point where businesses, homes are really gonna start being affected. Because the lack of snowfall and a bunch of torrential raining is also leading the ice to melt way faster than predicted before, as normally if you would leave like an ice cube out in the sun, depending on how hot it is, it would melt slowly. When you add other aspects, it'll melt faster. So basically, if you would take 90-degree heat and an ice cube, it's gonna melt pretty quick. Add rain, it's gonna be gone within a few minutes. This is happening on a daily basis. And this is the 7th greatest melt since 1978, behind, I believe, 2012 and the other early 2000s. This is pretty big considering this is 7th in the world, not just for them. According to Laura Stevens, she's a glaciologist, sorry if I butchered that, at Columbia University, and she's predicting that the runoff impact on Greenland will really change the dynamics of the ice sheet. So when she's talking about this, the center of Greenland is still very thick in ice. It has not melted as quickly, but the edges are what's really melting, so it's pushing inward, and that's going to have a great effect on more the inland part of Greenland. NASA is also predicting that if we don't at least try to slow this down because of global warming and everything else, that within the next 200 years, 63 inches is going to rise in the sea level. 36 of this is going to be the ice sheets that is holding up Greenland. So in the future, Greenland might not be here anymore because it is sitting on ice. So yeah, this is basically going to just predict that if we do not stop this, Greenland's going to disappear, and it's going to have the same effect on Florida. Everyone else is going to have to relocate, businesses, everything. So if you look at the pictures before that Cheyenne had posted, that's essentially what the shores of Greenland are going to start looking like, forcing it inland. And this is really making me question what this is going to hold for our future, let alone Greenland's future.
So when it comes to the future, as you've heard mentioned several times, the general range of how much the sea level is going to rise is about 2 feet, but no one can see into the future. So some scientists, including Willis and the Ocean Portal team, believe that 2 feet could be more on the conservative side of things, and that it could rise to as much as 6 feet in a worst case scenario if nothing is done to help correct this. So as we're thinking about this, we live in Ohio. We're surrounded by a bunch of other states. When I look at that window, I'm not going to see an ocean. I'm not going to have to deal with the flooding and any of that. So, I mean, like, why should I care? Well, according to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, there are a range of coastal hazards associated with these rising sea levels. These include the permanent submergence of land, meaning that some of the areas that we know today to be beaches could be permanently underwater. There would be more frequent and intense coastal flooding, enhanced coastal erosion, the loss and change of coastal ecosystems as we know them today, the salinization of soils and ground and surface water, which basically just means that excess salt would be found in things like the drinking water use in Florida, and impeded drainage, which is the restriction of the downward movement of water in soil. And each of these coastal hazards that could potentially happen, they don't just affect the coast, they affect me, they affect you, they affect Earth as we know it today. So what can we do to stop this? Willis and the Ocean Portal team suggest these several things up here, one of which is titled aquitecture, which is basically, I know it's a pun, I think it's kind of funny, it's architecture that's meant to withstand all of this flooding and everything that will come with the rising sea levels. These include things like houses built up on stilts several feet off the ground, and even houses that can float. They also discuss ways to hold back the sea, which as you can see here, that's a man-made seawall, and Seawalls have been used throughout history, dating all the way back to the Roman Empire, but they're only a short-term fix. You can only build these walls so high. So if things do turn catastrophic, then that's kind of not the best solution. Plus, with the waves pounding against these walls, they have to be constantly maintained to remain effective in stopping the ocean. But they do reduce the cost of, like, if they weren't there, what would have happened if the floods would have come through. So that is a positive for them, and they also give the inhabitants on these coasts more time to get away from these floods. So speaking of time, as time goes on and these sea levels continue to rise, as Trell and April mentioned, these coasts may become inhabitable. So what they would do, they might need to come join us in Ohio, sadly leave behind those pretty beaches and deal with weather like this out here today. But they would have to abandon their homes and their lives and their businesses and everything that comes with living on a beach, and it could lead to overcrowding in different areas because of our fast-growing and modern society today. So, that's okay. So, most of these things, it's not a way to fix the rising sea levels, it's just how to deal with the impeding, like, they're coming in, so we're just gonna run away from it or try to limit the effects of it. But what can we do to actually stop these rising sea levels? And that includes reducing the carbon and like the greenhouse gas emissions. So most of these, as Cheyenne mentioned earlier, are due to electricity industry and transportation. And while industry and things like that are out of our hands, we can't control what these large corporations really do. What we can do is small scale things like reduce, reuse, recycle, turn off your lights, carpool if you gotta make a run to Walmart, take a bunch of your friends, get that trip out of the way. And even you could go out of your way to plant a tree. So this graph from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change basically describes all of the climate and non-climate driven processes that can influence sea level events along coasts, which basically means that it shows the global, regional, and coastal drivers and ice processes you have heard us describe already. So, who's ready for spring break? Anybody? A week and a half? Everybody? Okay, cool. Not Mr. Husky, okay. I know at least a couple people are headed to Florida for spring break in about a week and a half, which, as Chell talked about, that's, I hope as you're sitting on these beaches in the next week and a half, you think about the things we have talked about. You think about, as you're sitting on the beach tanning, you can look out to the ocean and say, oh my gosh, by 2100, this could be 2 feet higher and I might not even be able to sit here today. So please just take this into consideration as you're out there relaxing. Remember that geology impacts us all, and these rising sea levels are honestly nothing to joke about, but please remember this is a problem and I should probably go home and plant a tree. So if you're interested in any further research, here are our references, and thank you guys for your time.